Welcome to another episode of the Scrumptious Woman. And with me, I have Juliana Uto, if I'm saying that correctly. And you are a wealth coach, mentor. I was going to say you dive deep into wealth and actually decipher it for a woman. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Explain your story. I know that you started life not in Canada, but in
Yes.
Europe.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
been quite a journey.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So real quick, I was born in Eastern Europe, in Romania specifically. It was communist at the time, no longer. And my parents defected. So there were, I guess you would call us political refugees, defected when I was 10. We lived in Austria for a year until all the things got processed. We ended up in Canada. And so I'm in Canada, have been in Canada ever since. I've lived in the Netherlands since then, and Paris and Asia, and I've traveled all over for work and for pleasure. Yeah, this is home now, and that part of my life was quite formative. To be, I didn't know that my parents were planning on defecting. I thought we were going on holiday, a summer holiday. So it was, as you can imagine, it was a bit of a shock to learn that we're not going back. And I would say that was a very transformative imprint in my life in terms of really thinking about safety and security and what that means. And then seeing my parents start over in a new country with two young children, and how like just a typical kind of immigrant experience of how hard they work to provide for us, and just having the sense of, I wouldn't say obligation, but it's almost like a sense of duty of, they made this, in my mind, a very significant sacrifice for us to be able to have the freedom to go to school and get an education. So I'm trained as a mechanical engineer. My sister's has a master's degree in economics. And just the sense of, we're here to work. This is not a free pass. So everything I've done has been really much about optionality and having choices and not being stuck. And money was a big part of that for me. So I worked very hard, very early to secure my financial freedom, which I did very early in my life. So now I help other women with that around investing.
And I feel the passion, right? If you go through transformative change in your life like that, because how old were you? You were under 10 or
Yeah, I was 10. I was 10 when we defected. So old enough to have built those bonds with my family, like my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and my cousins, and just the culture, and old enough to know and to have awareness of what was happening post it happening, if that makes sense. I would say I've done a lot of work around untangling that for me and some of the things that got wired, and using money as safety, as security was a big part of that. And I would say I'm still untangling that. I've gotten so much better, but yeah.
and it's a big piece that I talk about safety, where it
Yeah.
really anchors into our body the sense of not being safe, and where for me it's more sexual trauma,
Yeah.
or yeah, it could be something like what you're saying, right? It's like the way someone looked at us, or the way that there was no money, so your body is in constant lookout for danger.
Yeah.
Tell me how you went through that, and how now I know that you help lots of women, and you're super passionate about this because obviously you have that story and that's what got you through. Tell us a little bit about the story. Like the safety and money. What
Mhm.
had you
Yeah.
create
Yeah.
a safe haven for yourself with having financial
I think I associated at a very early age that having money means having choices,
safety?
and having choices means having freedom. And so I locked those, wired that into my subconscious, my nervous system at a very early age. And I purposefully went into engineering because I knew I'd be able to get a job. I knew there weren't that many women engineers. I had great marks and everything, but I chose engineering because I didn't want to go to school for 4 years. So, like, optionality and having freedom and having agency and sovereignty in my life was always just wired it at a very early age. And I associated having money with freedom and having choices and not ever being stuck, not ever having to depend on anyone. And so I worked really early. As soon as I started working, I began investing and saving money. Like, I was a really good saver. I The other thing that this experience, I think, created for me was just a sense of my safety was with my family. So I never was the kind of person who needed validation from outside of my family nuclear unit, which I think served me in the sense of I never felt like keeping up with the Joneses. Like I never felt like if I have the latest thing or the bag or that, then I'll be accepted, because I didn't care about that. It was like I'm my own sovereign being. I don't need anyone. And there's pros and cons with that, obviously. But for me, the pros were that I became a millionaire in my 30s. I bought a house. I paid off the house. My kids were born, and I had my kids pretty late in life in my 40s, because I prioritized my career again, because I was climbing the ladder and making the money and saving the money and like building my net worth. I had the choice and the freedom to step away and to work with them and to be present with my kids, which is a massive gift for me and for them, and for our family. And then I would say, as I began investing, I started investing in like private markets and alternative investments and things like private equity and venture capital and angel investments. It's just this whole other world that opens up beyond the traditional public markets. And so that's all been fascinating to me. And again, just this idea of cracking the code on all the things that are possible for women and men in terms of investing that are outside of the public domain. And I have so much to say about it, but that's how I ended up doing the work that I do around investing and with women specifically. I think having financial freedom is it's just a massive unlock for so many things, to not have to do the things that you don't particularly enjoy doing just because it brings money in, but where you can, I think self-actualization, people will say, sure, you can self-actualize and you can do all the self-development work and do all the things which require investment, certainly, I think, in this day and age, in the world that we operate in. But when you take money off the table, it just becomes so much easier. You get to ask a question like, what do I really want to do? What do I love to do? I just wish that for everyone.
Well, but that's also the point, right? Because if you're at that stage, it's a goes and say, oh, would I do this for free?
Yeah.
Yes, I would. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
then I'm actually doing maybe your life's mission, or on the way to your life's mission, on the way to something that you really love doing it. Because if we don't have the money, then that's financial insecurity just keeps us in that safety loop where it feels like everyone is a predator and out to get us, and you get all these money beliefs that people also have. And once you start uncovering, oh, where did that come from? It's not even mine.
Yes, it's so fascinating to me. And I think one of the things before coming on to the online world, which I only did about 3 years ago, I would say I didn't know about energetics, or not consciously. I'm sure I know that I had awareness of it, because when I was manifesting, or like manifestation, like I feel like I manifested my children, like to be able to have them naturally in my 40s is like a big deal. And so I feel like I didn't have conscious awareness of it. I certainly didn't have the tools around it, or like energy or vibration or frequency, or like all these terms and languages and conversations were just very foreign to me. So it was like, what is this? Like when I uncovered, I'm like, what is this world that I had no idea existed? Because as an engineer and someone who worked in business, not really doing engineering, but like more business things, like more business. Yeah, let's just leave it there. Very cerebral, like it was very cerebral work, and I figured everything out. And so again, I would say, when I think about like masculine and feminine, like I probably was mostly in my masculine, I'm going to make things happen. And I worked with mostly men. And so this was like a very new world to me. But what I wanted to share that I think is really important is when it comes to wealth building, there's just some pure like mathematical things like gravity that just exists with or without your awareness. Is just there. And so I think it's really important for people to realize the power of compounding and the power of compound growth on investments, and how important it is to start early and just put a little bit away and just to build that habit. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, once I make more money and once not just your needs, but really your wants are all taken care of, then maybe you'll spend some time, energy, effort on building your wealth, your financial kind of foundation. And I think that's a mistake. I think starting as early as you can and just building that habit of, okay, every month you put away $250, right? And maybe over time you increase that to 300. And then that starts to compound. And that's just like a magical thing. Compounding is a magical thing. It just
money onto that, and then it
compounds, and then that compounds, and that compounds. And I just think it's really important for people, women especially, to know that you don't actually need to be an expert in any of these manifestation energetic things. You can just purely take the money, put it away, take the money, put it away. And then over time it grows, and then it's like magic, really. It's like your money, it's like your money's manifesting money. We could say that, right? So I think that's really important.
So what would you say to someone who's living paycheck to paycheck and doesn't quite know where their next, let's say her next money is coming from?
Yeah.
How would you tell them to start changing that?
Yes. So this is, yeah, really good question. I do believe that the power of compounding is just, it's just science, and it's math, and it works with or without you, right? In some sense. I think when you're in that stage of living paycheck to paycheck and not really being in a place where you're able to increase your capacity to earn, I believe that the best place to start is to really like working around your mindset, working around raising your level of, I'm going to say vibration, like raising your level of self-worth, raising your level of confidence. Investing at that point, I don't think makes sense. I think your investment should be in increasing your capacity to earn more and increasing your capacity to get yourself out of that situation, which is a mental game for the most part. That's what I would point people to. I would say if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you should still be saving. No, I do believe that you should be working on your mindset and your ability to increase your earning capacity. Yeah.
And really see like where can I put myself in front of more people? What
Yes.
investing, maybe not money wise into a coach or everything. There's
Yeah.
there's so many free resources.
Yes, there's so many free resources. There's lots of books, lots
Find
of
yourself. Yeah.
yeah. So then you can shortcut in terms of if you want a result, you can throw money at it or you can throw time at it. And if you don't have the money, then you leverage your time. And so that might mean you're getting up. I still get up at 4 a.m. Like you get up at 4 a.m. or you stay up late or whatever your circadian rhythm happens to look like. But you take 2 hours a day and you put that into yourself. You put that into increasing, again, like your capacity to see the world differently, to increase your earning power, to learn a new skill set, to something that can get you out of that, because it's not going to be the money. And you have to, yeah, I suppose you'd also be wondering, how did you get into that situation? And I know that everyone's situation is very different, but I do think that it's the mindset piece that I think you have to work on at that point. There is if I'm just like a shameless plug, there's a company that I invested in. So I invest a lot in startups, and one of the companies I invested in is heroic.us. And it's an incredible app with Brian Johnson used to do Philosopher's Notes, and then he's now built this app and this platform. And I invested because I'm like, this is an incredible opportunity. I'm going to invest. This is my biggest check. I think I put 6 figures in. I know I put 6 figures into it. And they're doing some really incredible things. And more and more, I'm spending more time on the app. It's a beautiful app. And there's so many resources, very, very affordable. So just things like that, right? The whole mission of the company is to have 51% of the population flourish by 2051, the answer to the social dilemma. And so once you start to, again, going back to women investing, it's an incredible way to put your capital where you see a need, whether that's in caregiving or in social impact things, or so.
Beautiful. And I love this piece. So you go out and you invest, and I heard you say something about angel startup, so that you're an angel investor.
Yes, I'm an investor.
It's always like, I love that. I always find that really fascinating in the beginning when people are just starting up and they need some extra capital, that you are one of the people that can provide that for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been one of the most fulfilling parts of my investing journey, I would say. You know, how I secured my initial financial freedom, there's a pyramid, right? But initially it was in investing in public markets. And then again, it's important to have a diversified portfolio as well, right? So once you start to amass a certain level of net worth, it doesn't make sense to put all your eggs in one basket, right? And so I started angel investing, and it's an incredible vehicle for not only to get outsized returns, so much higher returns than you would get in the public markets, obviously high risk, high return. That's the opposite side of the coin. But just a really great way to support women and female founders. So there's only 2% of venture capital funding that goes to women, which I think is really sad when you look at a lot of the things that are tested, like drugs and even just understanding like the female body and hormones and menopause and all the things. Men are not going to fund those, right? And so it's on us women to be able to make sure that those companies flourish and that they have an opportunity to start. So I don't look at it as a donation. It's not a donation and it's not philanthropy. I expect to get a return on my capital, but it's a good way to get the returns as well as to have impact depending on how you're investing. Another company is a venture capital fund, female founded, that I invested in last week. Was they work at the intersection of femtech, health tech, fintech. So it's working with women around pivotal life stages. And so the companies that we invest in are companies that really address issues that women face around caregiving, around children, around our health. And those companies, for the most part, would not get funded if it wasn't for women.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Talking to two of my mentors who, between the two of them, have sold companies over £500 million
Yeah.
UK pounds. And they're also just saying it's like wealth in the hands of women would do so much more.
Yes.
But in the UK, it's even less than 2%.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really crazy.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it does have to do with mindset. A lot of it does have to do with the beliefs and the conditioning that we've taken on. And as a mother, do we have to sacrifice or do we have it all? So there's a lot of mindset that comes into it. And that's why I'm just so passionate when other women support other women and just help them rise.
Yeah. Yeah. I do the work that I do is I really want to see, I want to see more wealthy women. I want to see more financially secure, solid women on a solid financial footing. And I think when you have that, again, going back to my earlier experience, it gives you so much more choice, right? You no longer have to stay in relationships that are not supportive. You no longer have to stay in careers that are not supportive or work for bosses who are not the best, who don't have your best interests at heart. But you have choice. You can just be like, this doesn't support me, I get to leave. And you can fund that. So I just think
one piece that came up, I think I wrote down, is money gives you freedom, you have choice, not depending on anyone. I've heard that a few times.
yes, yeah,
It's quite, it like stretches that independent muscle. So I wonder, because I see this a lot of with entrepreneurs that I work with, a lot of women with very high power, but then they give up. The pleasure isn't there anymore because that part
yes.
just shut down. So how threatened are men around you? Sorry.
So I think that I think you can strike a balance. In my corporate career, I had evidence of women who rose to the C-suite who were very in their masculine and just very emotionally, I would say, shut down and not very warm or welcoming or just very like, boom, call it what business. And I would say I can tap into that in a very strong way. I'm very capable of tapping into that. Since leaving corporate, I would say I've softened, and certainly since becoming a mother, I've softened a lot, and I'm untangling a lot of those learned behaviors that you learn being in certain environments. Of this is the battleground, and for me to win, I need to be this way, which is not authentically who you might be. Because my career has mostly been in like oil and gas and very male dominated, like power, electricity, very male dominated industries. I think that the true alpha males, like the true masculine men, are not threatened. And then the ones who are not, I would say, maybe have some insecurities are perhaps. And then they'll use the seniority card as an example, or the positional power to gain ground. Yeah. And I think as a woman, like that shouldn't threaten you, right? If you want to get something done, then you just
completely.
There's two ways to do it. You can go into your masculine and get it done, or you can just stay in your feminine. I think one is whatever gets the job done, or whatever feels most authentic. But ultimately, that's something that I would say I'm still working on, because my dominant is if I want to get something done, I get it done. And it's not sometimes like a nice way. It's just more, it's a shortcut. I have this much time. I want to get from here to here. This, in my mind, I frame as this is the most expeditious route, not necessarily the one that's most nurturing or the most supportive to my nervous system or the people around me. And I would say it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Like, you want to have independence and agency and sovereignty, but you also be the person who builds a fortress around herself and uses your money or your power or like your positional power, whatever, as like a you ring fence yourself in some ways because it feels safer that way. I think a lot of people do that as well.
It's a journey, right? We start out we have both the masculine and feminine in us. So sometimes it's just like, and then it's, whew, okay. Now,
Exhausting.
just, that was tough now. Let's actually just be in our feminine flow a little bit.
Yeah.
So is there ever a balance? Whatever. Sometimes you just need to work harder to get things done. And then other times you can actually take your foot off the gas a little bit.
Can I just say one more thing? I will say, I think the financial industry is very much anchored in the masculine, and it's very much I think it's used as a gatekeeping mechanism in some way. Of if we come across as being like, you have to be very smart and this is serious business and it's for men, and it has been, which I think is why a lot of women are just not comfortable with traditional financial advisors or financial advice or the financial world, and then so it feels very off-putting. And to that, I think I would just encourage women to find the safe spaces where they can be themselves and still build wealth, where it's not like you can ask all the questions. Like you can ask all the questions, and if it's your money, and if someone is not answering you in a way that feels good, then look for someone else.
That is good advice. I remember when I started trading, I really got that kind of like pushback because she doesn't know what she's doing. Do you know what this means and what that is? And it was just patronizing. Can I just get a different cat manager?
What else I can speak to, because you're not it. Yeah.
And what was it? And after all, it was just like, just doesn't.
And that's like, it's your money. And if you're not being served, then find someone who will. Like, yeah.
I loved it. So you are one of these people that create safe spaces, I think, for women.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So tell us about how, when people are like, okay, this sounds like Juliana knows what she's talking about. I would love to have a conversation with her. What do you do? How do women step into your world?
Yeah, sure. The main way that I work with women these days, because my time is pretty limited, like I still invest and I do advisory for the companies that I invest in, and I have little children and I like to work out and do all the things. So the main way that women come into my world is through Wealth Bravery, which is I initially started off as a mastermind. So for women that are kind of between 1 and 10 million net worth, I don't think there's really spaces. You kind of have outgrown your traditional financial advisor, but you're not yet at the, I don't know, whatever, like the Tiger 21 Club, which is, I think you need like $30 million of investable assets. It's really more of a mentorship. So Wealth Bravery, it's a 9-month container. We really go through like designing your personal wealth roadmap and your ecosystem and help you understand the inner and outer game of wealth. Because I think the other thing that the financial advisory industry misses out on is like wealth building. And there's the ability to earn money and have money coming in versus the ability to hold on to it versus the ability to grow it. They're very different energies, very different frequencies. It feels very different in your nervous system when you're doing a 20K wire for a coach versus doing a 50K wire for an investment. That's, say, an angel. It feels very different. And one is more scary than the other because you believe that when you're investing in yourself, that's a sure thing. But really, what return are you getting on that investment besides the initial, I feel good being in this space, that's nice, but did you get a return? You multiply. And you can't always measure it in like dollars and cents. But I do think in some of the online spaces that I operate in, it's just mind-blowing to me, like how much people invest in their own. And I've done that in the last few years in their own self-development. But you have to then say, okay, are you multiplying that somehow, or do you just feel better? And would you feel better if you went for a walk? Not to diminish, but
so refreshing to actually hear someone say this. We spend, and the whole coaching world is the personal development world. There are some big numbers there.
Oh, massive.
There's massive numbers there, and it's like, okay, and what do you get out of it? It's like, oh, it shouldn't show up, whether this, whether that. It's like, oh.
We talk about this. There's this massive wealth transfer happening to women. So the baby boomers are aging out, men are dying, they're passing their wealth on to their wives or their daughters. And so there's this like trillions of dollars of like wealth transfer that's happening, and through inheritance for the most part, right? Or divorce or whatever. And I actually think that the biggest wealth transfer is in the online coaching space because I just feel like it's an incredible vehicle for transferring wealth from like one set of people to like another set of people. And not to say I've invested like heavily, like beyond what makes sense through a logical investor lens. And I can justify it with like emotion and logic and all the things. But truly, if I was to like, take back that capital and put it into the market, I would be like financially way farther ahead. And there's so many, again, going back to someone who doesn't have access to resources. There are so many resources, like coaching resources, like 6-ticket investment. There's so many resources that there's books, there's Heroic, there's conversations, there's YouTube, like loads of stuff, like lots of really incredible, which truly is what I think a lot of coaches have read, and you read back. It's all sales and marketing, not to diminish, but like it's an industry, just like the wealth management industry is an industry, and you pay a certain percentage of your assets under management, and it's a business. And so I think people need to be like very eyes wide open on like, it's a business, and like being very clear on why you're making certain moves and what the return is on that move.
That is actually just so refreshing. I love it. Because it's really true. We can get so caught up in doing Tony Robbins, whatever, diamond program, or the this, or the that, whoever. I'm just dropping some names.
Yes. Yeah.
It could be anyone. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, yeah, would have been better maybe to invest that into a house or a property or some stock or whatever.
Yes. And I think this is the thing. If you, part of the conversations that I have with him inside Wealth Bravery is like, what is it? What is the money for? What is the money for? What does success look like for you? What's the like, what would be a good life? And I think this is where knowing yourself deeply is so important, because if a good life for you is being with your family and having 1 or 2 nice vacations, or being in nature, or taking good care of yourself, and just having the freedom to not have to do anything for a day or a week, or not have to hustle, not have to be on social media, like not have to, you could just check out and disappear for a few months, and life is grand. Like if that's a good life to you, which is to me, it's freedom to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, like full stop, then in some ways that doesn't actually require millions and millions of dollars. I think people have gotten a little bit deluded around what success looks like, or what it can look like. And so then you're trading your life force for something that doesn't actually bring you more joy and happiness. It creates more stress, because now you have to not just make up the money that you invested in this program, but now you have to get a return on that. And so it puts pressure on you to perform, and you can't now check out, because so unless you're at the point where you're like
Running out the wheel.
Yeah. And so I just think it's important to have that defined, and then at the very minimum, like secure that number for yourself before you start to go down this path of the more money I invest, the more enlightened I am, the more something, whatever. Like that's not necessarily the case. And
really recognize what is it that I call it scrumptiousness.
makes you happy.
What makes me happy? Where do I feel my most vibrations? What do I need for that? And we have kids and they're going through university and they are paying rents and this and that. It adds up and you're like,
yes,
oh, okay.
This is not about live within your means and think small. And yes, there's abundance and there's all the things, but being able to hold the duality of that, and just making sure that unless you're like an expert in this space and you truly are able to just call money in, like it's magic. I have a lot of like ultra high net worth kind of friends and people in my, none of them talk this way. This is so curious. Like for the longest part, I felt very, I would say like, I'm in this world, but I'm also in this world, and the two worlds are not talking to each other. And so I really try and bridge the two of,
Beautiful.
there's the 3D reality that we live in of you got to pay your rent and you got to pay your kids college tuition and you should have insurance. And yeah, it's amazing. But what if something happens to you and you're no longer able to show up, or what if you just don't want to? Then at least you have you're secure, you're set, like you're good. The money's there. I never work a day in my life. I'm good. Like I'm good, right? I'm not gonna be on a yacht and fly private, but that doesn't. I've done that and it's fine, but it's not something I want to do all the time. I want to hang out with my kids. I want to sit like on the couch and read a book, and I want to go.
Good for them and just have.
That's it.
But that's really where the comparisitis comes in, right? So, oh, I want this, what they have. And it's like, but why is it really going to make you happier? You know,
Yes.
your handbags and this and that. And like the private
Again, nothing wrong with it. It's just really important to, again, like I think we hear about curating your feed, right? There's a lot of stuff in politics and whatever that I don't, especially now, I just don't look at it because doesn't add to my life. Being really mindful of what are the bubbles that you're in.
Yes.
Because they're bubbles. Like that is not representative of world or of how most people think, or so just be mindful of the bubbles that you've put yourself in, and that now you're like, this is reality, because it's not always the case, right? So yes, dream big and anything is possible. And that's angel investing essentially is that, right? It's like someone has an idea and we've sold it as this is going to be the next amazing thing. And as an investor, you're like, I believe you, and
I'm going to take a risk.
Well, yes, I believe in this vision that you're creating. And so I'm willing to back it with my own capital. So again, like there's room for all of it. I think it's when you do things at the expense of your emotional freedom, your financial freedom, your family's freedom, even, right? If you haven't taken your kids on holiday and you're investing like multiple six figures in personal development, yeah, maybe you can tell yourself a story. Well, this is going to pay off at some point, and I'll do the Disney or whatever trip, right, with the kids when I make back the money. And I think a lot of people think that way. And
then they get the disillusion.
Maybe not.
You know, it's refreshing just to get this feedback from someone who is actually in finances and tries to help other women and other men and people just be financial, secure, viable, responsible.
I think that's the key message is like be grounded in the reality of life, have your needs and your family's needs taken care of. Check yourself, make sure that you're not, because I think that you can also get into this space of there are plenty of people who are incredibly well off financially and they just have a very limited scarcity based mindset. They're not generous. They're worried that it's going to disappear, right? So there is just such a fine balance between all of it. And I just invite women to consider everything, not just rose-colored glasses and not just the world is falling apart, but it's all there. But you do need to you need to look at your numbers. I think is what I'm saying. Know what your net worth is. Like, what is if you take all your assets and you subtract all your liabilities, what is the number? And that's important because when you look at in your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, you might want to have the choice to work, but you might want to have the choice not to have to.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to have some money invested that you can draw down to live on. So it's just these are things that we don't talk about often enough, I think. And there's so much freedom that comes from you're good. You know, you're good.
Knowing your numbers and knowing that that you can breathe.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah.
Beautiful. It's been a beautiful conversation. People, if they want to get in touch with you, it's on do you have a website?
I do. It's herbalsociety.com, but I think Instagram is probably the best place to find me. So it's just Juliana, Juliana _ is my Instagram handle.
Perfect.
Yeah. You too.
Excellent. This will all be in the show notes as well. So please give Juliana a follow and learn more from her incredible advice. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.